Good versus evil. Justice versus villainy. Eating the last donut versus being an actual psychopath. It's a tale as old as time. If you've consumed fiction of any kind, you've most definitely come across this struggle, especially in gaming. For the longest time, games let you live out the dream of being the hero, facing the forces of darkness and taking the big elbow to Beelzebub. Then one day someone asked, what if you don't want to be good? What if they want to be an asshole? And thus the morality system was conceived. Okay, definite oversimplification there, but you get my meaning. Since then, more choices have been popping up now and again, and I feel most people will agree with me when I say, they're crap. They're crap. Unfortunately, morality isn't a binary thing. It's weird and subjective and games have a hard time giving the player choices that really convey the nuance of the whole thing. So let's look at a couple of the more common systems and just go to town on them. I mean, this is no brainer, right? The most common and the most flawed system is the one where you're given the choice between doing something good and something evil. Pretty simple stuff, honestly, but naturally what is good in one instance isn't in another, and one act of evil can do a whole lot of good. That's not really the point I want to make here. The issue is these are usually so far removed from each other, it's comical. The good choice is usually something sickeningly good like, no, I will not kill this homicidal mass murderer, wanted for arson, torture, cannibalism, and several overdue library books, for in my mercy I believe that he may learn and turn a new leaf. And then the evil choice is something daft like, yo dog, you want to see me punt this orphan off a cliff? You think I'm exaggerating for tuber funnies, and you'd be right. But only exaggerating a little. Anyone with working eyes will see the game in the background is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Probably one of the most famous karma meters in gaming, and one of the first fully realised moral choice systems. Choosing the good option pushes you towards the light side and bad towards dark. But the choices swing so widely from Paragon self-righteous champion of the people to moustache-twirlingly evil. I mean, look at it. Look at it! I want you to compare this to how Palpatine took power in the prequel trilogy. He was slow, methodical and subversive, twisting events to his benefit before a coup d'etat. This is a complete nut job, shaking you down for money, then shanking you anyway and kicking your dick in. There is no subtlety. It's just running around with a massive sign saying, "Hi, I'm Michael Stabbington III. I am insanely evil." But I don't know, maybe you can be hilariously pure or ghoulishly evil on a case-by-case basis. Wrong. Sit your ass down and listen. You can't dip your toe here. You decide to do one evil act, pull up a goddamn chair because you're here for life. You can't half-ass this. No, seriously, you can't. The biggest drawback of this system is that the game only rewards you for going fully one way or the other. No room for nuance if you want the good stuff to come late game. So put your best shoes on, those orphans won't punt themselves. Let's just hope that the remake fixes it, though probably not. That being said, the good versus evil thing has worked in the past, kind of, vaguely. Bioshock has a little mechanic with the little sisters. See what I did there? Anyway, you get to choose to rescue or harvest them for some sweet, sweet Adam, the game's MacGuffin, in a way of unlocking and upgrading your powers. Harvest is quite obviously the bad option, requiring you to kill the little girl for the most Adam. So you'd be correct in assuming that would make the game easier at the cost of morality, right? Kind of asking if the ends justify the means. Unfortunately, that's where the whole thing falls apart. Firstly, by rescuing the little sisters, you get several presents from them, potentially a solid amount of Adam anyway, so while you get still net more while harvesting, it's not enough to really warrant being a child-killing psychopath! And even if you do rescue them, to do so you have to kill the big daddy guardian they've imprinted on, so you're still a douche canoe. So the choice between good and evil suffers from being ludicrously binary and lacking any nuance, or being just so muddied it almost becomes irrelevant. So let's look at something else, something a little less cut and dry. Probably looking at the segment title and thinking, what the hell does that mean? Well, it's a lot simpler than my pretentiousness would lead you to believe. Essentially, I mean morality systems that aren't tied to is this option good or evil, and are more kind of vague. Wait, it doesn't clear anything up. Right, okay, example. Dishonored. In Dishonored, you play as Corvo Atano, royal protector famed for the murder of the Empress, spending most of the game removing usurpers and clearing your name. Please note how I use the word removing and not say butchering, because This game functions not on good versus evil, because from Corvo's point of view you're the good guy righting wrongs, but instead on chaos. Now, chaos is governed by the following criteria: how stealthy you are, how much you help people, and how much of a murderous a-hole you are. Obviously, remaining undetected, assisting the locals, and not killing people will lower your chaos, and doing the opposite of that will increase chaos, causing all sorts of fun, irritating things to occur. This also extends to assassination targets. Yes, in a complete juxtaposition of the word, you don't need to kill your targets, but instead can perform certain acts that take them out of the picture. Kind of a character assassination. Ah, that's why it's an assassination. Awesome. Back on topic, these acts are typically harder to perform, but cause way less chaos than just out and out murking them. Seems pretty easy to understand, yeah? Kill bad, not kill good. An actual look at ends justify the means, and while this is all fine and dandy for the most part, there's one moment in the game that is a little suspect. Lady Boyle's last party. So yeah, the low chaos good option is to give said Lady Boyle to a creepy dude in a rat mask giving off major stalker vibes to take away and do stuff with.
Oh my love, someday you will understand. You'll never know how happy you've made me. Someday she'll learn to appreciate me. After all, she'll have her whole life.
I understand it removes her without killing, and Corvo is a distant pragmatist, but there is something seriously wrong with this whole scenario. But then, I've never been accused of killing the Empress and imprisoned for 6 months, so what do I know? Besides that weirdness, the chaos system doesn't really affect gameplay all that much after a certain point, other than essentially locking you out of some of the cooler weapons and powers if you're going for low chaos. A probably better example for a more abstract morality system is Fallout New Vegas. Now, it still has the good versus evil thing going on with the karma system that's binary as all hell, but it also has faction reputation. How this works is actually super easy to understand. If your actions help a faction, either by directly working with them or just taking out their enemies, it improves your rep. If it hinders, lowers it. The most notable of these factions being the NCR and Kaisar's Legion. Neither of them is inherently good or bad, just two big forces vying for control of the Mojave. Other than being the two biggest factions, your rep with them has actual impact in the game. Helping one will make the other like you less, hate you more, and eventually send the boys around to break your kneecaps.
The Kaisar has marked you for dead, and the Legion
Also makes some areas nigh on inaccessible unless you've hopped up on stims, meds, and whatever else you've pulled out of the garbage and have murder on the brain. Of course, the issue there is it cuts off a good amount of content and pretty much condemns certain cool NPCs, but this is war and there is no room for diplomacy. Wait, it also does this without massively changing the storyline, which is a little irksome. There are also various other factions throughout the game with similar, if not on a smaller scale, effects of the larger groups, and are mostly optional content, but then that's the best part of the Fallout games, right? Actually, I know exactly how to explain what these morality systems are. Instead of being tied to one-dimensional concepts of what is good or evil, it focuses more on personal ideology, even if it comes down to thinking this one side is less of a bastard than the other. The main downside is obviously that, as it's inherently vague, it can lead to a bit of a disconnect between the player and character. But maybe there's something that straddles the line a bit better. Something like... You know the problem with morality? Too open, too vague, too much possibility. So clearly the best option is to lock it down, lop off its legs, and hang it on the wall to show your guests. Restricted or limited morality is simply put either snapping half the moral spectrum off or having you locked down to certain criteria. This isn't super common that I know of, but it generally moves the ambiguity and potential issues of the whole good versus evil thing. Let's take a look at the locked moral spectrum. Overlord has you take the role of the titular Overlord, who is an Overlord. You are tasked with growing your power, dominion, and slaying the great heroes that killed the previous Overlord and rule with an iron fist. Damn, I said Overlord a lot there. Anyways, as the game progresses, it throws you several events where you get to choose how much of an ass you want to be, including, but not limited to, stealing food, ransacking villages, taking slaves, choosing money over slaves, dumping your mistress for a more evil sister, and burning down a forest. Doing these raises your corruption, which is basically your evil meter. The more of an ass you are, the more corrupt you become. You following along, all right? good. Conversely, not doing these things, specifically the ones that give you more of an active choice than Nile giving you a vague hint, will lower your corruption. However, lowering corruption will only band-aid some of your monstrous evil acts, with all the options only reaching -12 corruption. Now let's see how this changes the game. It doesn't. Sure, it modifies certain things here and there and determines what max level spell you get, but it doesn't change how the story progresses or anything like that. And arguably the worst part is it's still the moral good versus evil thing, only now being neutral is treated as good and evil is still evil. And it's pretty much the same in the sequel. However, this falls more into a role-based morality, the second type. You see, rather than choosing how much of an asshole you want to be, you instead get to choose what flavour of asshole. Oh, that sounds so wrong. Will you dominate and brainwash everyone to do your bidding? Or just go for some good old-fashioned wholesale slaughter? Well, this changes basically nothing. It does showcase something way better than one system. You are the overlord, an evil tyrant bent on world domination, regardless of how many people are still around. Now, the more astute viewer will have noticed the main gripe that has been threading its way through this entire video. Moral choices, for the most part, change nothing, and when they do, it's typically a minor balance change and maybe some extra lines of dialogue. And a lot of the time, it's relegated to what equates to multiple choice questions. What if I told you there existed a game that got it right, where moral choices not only matter, they are an active part of the game? Anyone that doesn't live under a rock will know exactly what game I'm talking about. For those rock people, allow me to introduce Undertale. The critical indie darling that people will not shut up about. Other than the solid writing and overall really lovable characters, Undertale is lauded for its deconstruction of the RPG genre. See, the game from the start hammers into you that you don't have to solve all conflict with violence, and explaining the mercy system, where you can interact with monsters to come to a non-violent conclusion. Doing this will cause the game to progress as the dev encourage, and the game will stay mostly its cutesy puzzler with lovable characters. However, you also notice a 5-letter word listed among the combat options. While Undertale encourages the pacifist route, it never says you can't solve all your problems with the liberal application of violence. In fact, doing so completely changes how the game feels. It becomes a typical RPG, but this time you actively seek out encounters to kill to progress the genocide route. Areas that were lively are deserted, NPCs that are still around interact completely differently, and it even remixes boss fights into a far more powerful version, all to take your genocidal ass out. It even goes so far as to alter your game on subsequent playthroughs if you go this path, to remind you of what you chose to do. And that's just brilliant. The game doesn't just say, now choose, good or evil, at random intervals or important plot points. It drops the gauntlet at the very start and makes you work for it. There are no half measures here. Or there are, but shh. It's all or nothing. And yeah, I know I criticised KOTOR for that, but this is something the game was designed for, rather than just being something that comes incidentally. And there's no silver bullet option at the end that reverts your path to the other. You have to live with what you've done. The question is, can you? There we go, another video, this time about how dumb/half-ass morality systems in games are. Hope you all enjoyed. If you're feeling like a good sausage, leave a like, comment, subscribe, whatever to feed the algorithm. And if you're feeling decidedly evil, do the same, because that will mean more work for me if I can ever get this channel airborne. Until next time, this is the Resident Gremlin, and would eating discarded leftovers be a good or bad option?